right. All right, I'll mute myself. Stream. Um, Hello, welcome. We're going to be doing just a real simple playtest Northwest stream this evening. I did get a bunch of new computer stuff, which I'm very excited about. But there is something interesting that I wanted to kind of go over. One of the things um, uh, that I've been doing, and that I've been actually been trying to experiment, was actually trying to like 3D model my pieces and that sort of stuff. It's actually much easier than you think to do kind of 3D modeling for things, and I'll kind of show off some examples of like what I mean. Um, so we'll go over that. There was a lot of good questions. Actually, there was a somebody that responded back in the meetup, had a bunch of questions. They were great questions. Um, I don't think that I would be able to do much justice to some of the questions. But the moment that I let Nicole know, she was like, "Yeah, I want to do that as well." Um, but Nicole is out this evening, so she's working late. So she will be on next week, and we're going to actually do that as kind of the topic for next week. So a lot of those questions we're going to basically kind of do an FAQ. If you have any questions in the chat or anything like that, let us know, and we can actually make that kind of a topic in next week's show. If you have any questions in Blender, that's also, or 3D modeling or physical pieces in Tabletop Simulator, you can ask them now. I mean, that's pretty much what we're going to be doing. Every time I've tried to do the Blender, kind of like Blender tutorials, I don't try and go into too much detail with it, but I will just kind of start with like simple basics just to give you an understanding for things. And I will kind of break that down just a little bit. I will also show off some examples. For an example, I have Tabletop Simulator open, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up one of my objects that I was kind of playing around with. So let me go get that on the other screen. But the main thing about this is kind of, it's interesting with like how when you use pieces and parts inside a Tabletop Simulator. You can use dice, you can use the dice template, that sort of thing. You can also do a couple other things, but I was just kind of playing around with some of the I was kind of playing around with some just basic kind of uh, items. And so I kind of actually, oh, that's right, that file's broken. Oopsies. Here, I'll just delete that one. I'll show actually the one that I know for a fact works. So I made this real simple cube, and yes, this will definitely work. And I will hit import, and it works, and it looks pretty slick. So I'm gonna show you an example of this. So let me switch over to that. And I'm going to be down in the corner, just a little itty down over here, down in the taskbar. So this is just kind of an example of kind of an object that I did in Tabletop Simulator of just a cube. Why would you want to do something like this? Why would you want to kind of use or stamp a cube with something? Actually, it's a little more helpful than you would think, because say if you had something along those lines, like you had a component where you needed to kind of um, differentiate it, and for example in the game that I'm designing, um, I will need to have some kind of signifier for what the cubes actually have on them. So this will all kind of just help out people as they kind of play through on the game. I am using kind of color cubes, But say if somebody is colorblind or has difficulty with that, might be able to switch that over to do more of a colorblind friendly version. And the cool thing about this is that if you change the color for it, it will change the color of the cube as long as it kind of has a standard. Um, it will kind of apply like a hue to the item that you're using. You also notice it'll have some like reflectiveness. I can turn that off. Here, we'll make it as reflective as cardboard. So that's kind of cool. But you'll notice that it kind of has like a little bit of beveling. It has like a little like kind of it has like a little bit of 3D texture to it. I kind of sunk in the sides to each other, so it's kind of fun. But this will kind of give you a kind of insight on how you can just take, say, a normal object like this cube that's in Blender, and you can kind of create like a little quick UV kind of image for it. And that UV image actually, you can create a template, and so that template could actually help you. So when you're, uh-oh, did my headset? That was weird. Oh, headset. Mm. Anyway, um, so with that, you're gonna have kind of like this. You'll have this cube available, and this cube will kind of um, be our starting point. We're not actually gonna do anything, crazy in Blender with the objects. What we are going to do is we're going to kind of create like a template, and then we can take that template and we can do whatever we want with that template. And so all we would just need is just say this object. So we'll go back to this. All I have is just when I go in here and I do a model, a custom model, I will go in and see I have a coin and a cube. The coin is actually broken, so I'm not going to import it, but I do have that cube. I can hit select. And since I'm not looking to upload it to the cloud, I'll have local, and I'm not going to put an image to it. I'm going to import it, and look, it's that cube, but it just doesn't have anything on it. I can go back into it, image, and see I have actually a couple of different things. So I have a cube with a scroll on it. Local again, I'm not uploading it to the cloud, I'm just playing around with it locally. And then I could say treat it like a dice, so I'll hit import. And so now I actually could potentially, if I wanted to make some kind of fancy fun dice, I could. If I wanted to just kind of have it be as a thing at a distance so you could see that sort of thing, you sure can do that. But the main thing is that kind of Blender is going to be your kind of your start to get into and kind of use the kind of images. So it kind of makes a template for your object and for that image, or sorry, for that image, gosh, that UV layer for your 3D object. But I'm just going to say, we're going to do this real quick, and I'm going to just show you some of the kind of the things you can do with it. All of the stuff, with the exception of Tabletop Simulator, is free, is available on the internet. So there's actually quite a few applications that you can use to kind of do stuff up professionally if need be. First things first, the first one is Blender. Blender is super everywhere. You can find it. It's typically done with like animation and that sort of stuff, but you can use it to do 3D modeling. It's, you can use it to sculpt, you can do it to pretty much use it for whatever you want, but it's a 3D kind of tool, and it is freely available. So um, there is, however, I mean, like, there's a lot of stuff for it, but there's lots of videos, there's lots of educational things that are out there. Everything like went away. I was holding it on the taskbar. So Blender is super free. The next one is I'm actually going to bring that to the foreground, is going to be a program called Medibang Paint Pro. And so this is actually typically an application that is used more for anime, manga, and that sort of thing. But it's a very simple paint program that uses layers. And that's what I'm looking for, is I need a program that has layering. You could use Photoshop, you could use GIMP, you could use anything like that. GIMP is another free piece of software. Photoshop is not free, but those applications are going to deal with things in layers. And that's really what's important to this, is so you can kind of add in the UV image as the template, and you can kind of make the design, and then you can hide that image, export that image, and then now you have essentially an item that you can use for your cube. So we'll minimize that. So I'm actually going to go back into Blender, and we have this cube here. So this cube is just a cube. When you start up Blender, you get three objects. You get the camera, which is right here, you get the cube, and you get the light. Whatever. The important part is we want this object. So we want this cube. We're going to keep it. We're going to actually go into File, and we're going to go into Export. And so what I'm going to do is I am going to save it. Just make a new folder. All right. And so I've got a cube. Actually, I should probably rename that plain cube. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to export that object. So I have that object. So if I was to go into my folder structure, I have that file there. So we're still going to keep working with this. So we've saved this file as a .obj, and that's an object file. So that's something we can export into Tabletop Simulator a little later on. So that's the first part of it. The next part of it is actually what we're going to do is we're going to highlight this entire thing. So I'm going to highlight the whole cube. And one of the things you can do is you can go into, you can right click it. Oops, sorry. Oops, so you'll highlight the whole cube. Well, sorry. You'll go from object mode to edit mode. What that's going to do is that's going to turn this, instead of like a cube, it's actually going to have, it's going to be, there's dots and orange lines to show that the whole thing's been highlighted. But the whole thing didn't get highlighted. See this little bit back here? It wasn't part of the highlight when I dragged it over. I was able to get that. Since it's a 3D object, not able to get all the parts to it. There's a little icon over here that's kind of like two lines that what that does is that toggles the X-ray for the scene. So now I can see the whole image. And so when I highlight the whole thing, I grab all of the little dots. Those little dots are called vertices. And so those are kind of like one dimensions. So the one-dimensional points essentially. That's just there. I've have the entire thing highlighted. So what I can do is I can actually go into when I've highlighted it, you're going to see up in the top there's like a bunch of options. There's vertex, edge, face. Doesn't matter. We want the one that says UV, and I want to unwrap it. And so what that's going to do is that's going to take that file and it's going to unwrap it. You'll notice that I now, when I go up to the top, there's a tab that says UV editing. UV editing is just a split of basically whatever the object that you're looking at, because you have your 3D view of the world you're working with in Blender, and then on the left-hand side is this UV editing screen. This UV editing screen is essentially just that file. So you'll notice that it kind of has like what looks to be like a cross, but it's essentially all the sides of that cube. I can hit new, and I'm going to just say cube UV, well, wait, plain cube UV. I have too many things that say like, cube. And I'm going to change the color actually from black to white. Okay, and I'm going to hit OK. The width and the height is 1024 pixels by 1024 pixels. We can leave that as is. So I hit OK. And so now I have essentially like a, here, we'll zoom out. So now I have the image. I actually have this, this item here. If I go into the UV, oh, I was like, what is that noise? But you know what? I'm gonna mute my phone. It's coming from the other room. Sorry. So I'm still in UV editing. So what I've done is I hit the little plus to create a new plane cube UV. So now this would be a kind of white layer, and whatever's on that layer will show up on those sides. I'll go into the little UV menu that's kind of inside of it, and I can do a thing that says export UV layout. Once again, I am now going to go into that. I am going to all right. I'm going to basically have a little thing where it says, you know, you're exporting it as a .png, and I'm going to export the UV layout. So now that's it. That's all we really need to do with Blender for this. All now we need to do is we now need to go into an art program. And so one of the things that we'll do is I'll open up that art. So let's see. I'm going to go in. And I'm going to open up the file. And sure enough, there's the image. So I've opened up the PNG. Whoops. Wait, wow. Okay. All right. I will. So the mouse wheel is like zooming in and out on it. So sorry. So now we have the object. So we have this. We essentially have a layout for our cube. And so what I'll do is I'll draw on that with purple, and then hey, we'll draw on this one with blue. You know, like let's do a green here. I'm just gonna do that, and then I'm gonna do like a yellow, and I'm just like drawing. I'm drawing directly on it, but this is just to kind of prove as like an example. So now we got orange right here, and then check it out. We're gonna do some red, and we're gonna do squiggles for red. Woo, squiggles. I could created a layer inside of Medibang and basically use that instead, but I'm just gonna save it, whatever. So I hit save. Doesn't really matter the settings. So now what should happen is now I have my cube right here, right? So here's what I'm gonna do. Let me grab the object. So give me a second. All right. And so I am going to locate that file. So here, I'm going to switch over. So it's real fast actually. So because I have to like go through a bunch of files, and that's boring. You don't want to see that. All right. And so what I've done is I've located the files. And so those files are now, I have the model, the mesh. So that was basically the OBJ. So I go into it, plane cube, OBJ, make it local because I'm not uploading it to the cloud. I'm just experimenting with kind of my own table. Diffuse image. This is going to be that UV file. So what that does is that will then apply the image to it. And it kept it transparent. And that is wild. Oh, that is cool. I didn't think that was actually going to work. But, you know, oh, that is pretty cool, actually. Here, we'll turn it into a dice. Oh, it's got a transparency level to it. That is wild. I love it. I love I love it so much. But yeah, so now we actually have our cube for that. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Um, there are ways that you can go through and you can be a little more adventurous with that. Um, but this is just that's it. I didn't shape or mold anything. I just created a little file for it. I unwrapped a UV file, so basically I made the template of when Blender for Blender to do this. I just uh, highlighted all the files, and then all I did is I just exported that UV layout. By making that UV layout, that creates kind of that base for it. So then I take that file, I threw it into MS Paint or whatever thing, I doodle on it. Um, Man, that's crazy though. It's interesting. I didn't think about the transparency that actually takes that, but that's pretty cool. Um, Exported that PNG, and then I go straight in here, and now I have that. Um, if you're not messing with the file, then yeah. If you do make simplistic shapes, that same thing will apply. Without going too much into detail, like once you start to kind of say, um, go into, well, do, well, let's see if I can find it. Uh, ba, 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 ba. If I go into, hmm, I'm trying to find it right now. I've got so much crap on my computer. All right. That's not it. Here we go. I'm getting it now. um, so this is an example of like something that's a little more. This was the here. Let's flip back. So remember these cool little cubes? So these cool little cubes have like a little bit of beveling to them. They look a little nicer. They're a little fun. But there is going to be more of a complication and kind of a level to it. But you're playing around with it. That's have fun with it. Um, there's a couple things you want to make sure that you're thinking of when you're kind of working with these files. So let's go take a look at it in Blender. So I'm going to let's go back to layout. Okay, so this is that cube. So the cube has kind of like a cool little 3D kind of style to it. If I go into edit mode, it's going to break it down a little more, and it's going to show kind of the points of, you know, it's going to show the various points and lines and things that are kind of connecting it all throughout. I've highlighted the whole box in this. So I'm going to go into UV editing, and you'll notice that it has kind of created, it has like a little, it has the lines and items around each of the boxes. And so if I wanted to, I could put, say, icons inside of each of these squares, like what I did. I took some images off of gameimages.net, I think it was, and I took those scrolls and I just placed them square and center. I wasn't perfect about it, just dropped them each in there. And then I think I added some goofy little texture to kind of make it a little weathered or whatever. And sure enough, now I've got kind of these Minecraft-esque, scroll cubes. Um, so you can do stuff with that. There is some stuff as you start getting into it and you start exploring with it. There is one thing you do want to there is one thing that you do want to look towards, and that is if is everything facing the wrong way, right way. Um, there is there is one that I did create, and sadly this coin didn't work. and I'll show you kind of the item that happened with this coin. Um, the coin was supposed to be kind of this cool little coin essentially, that I was going to use as kind of the markers. I took like one of the little soldier heads and I put that on the face of the coin. But you'll notice that the coin doesn't really have a face to it. So I kind of made a mistake on that. When you're doing stuff inside Blender, there are things. Hello, thank you. Um, there are things that there's one thing that you want to be aware of, and it's essentially called, um, is the face oriented properly? Is it basically on the outside? And what it means by that is that we kind of talked about how there were like little points. Those are vertices. There's lines, which are called edges. So that's kind of the 2D. It's connecting a vertex and a vertex together to create a line. And then a cube is essentially, four vertices and four vertices, and they're all connected with lines. Once it's connected with lines, you can put in a face. And that's what kind of these light gray things are. When something when something is not right, and I'll show you what happens when you're looking at something that's wrong. You can go into this menu up here. There's a thing called the viewport overlay. And the viewport overlay has kind of a bunch of stuff in here. Ignore all that. Not going to be too helpful for you. The one that is going to be helpful for you is face orientation. When you check that, it's going to show what's actually facing you properly as you're viewing the object in a 3D world. So if I was to take this and I was to say, I don't know, export it, and it's broken, and I'm going to call this broken cube, and I'm going to export it. Let's go into Tabletop Simulator, go into custom. I'm going to go find broken cube, hit select, local. I'm not uploading it, I'm just goofing around with that. And I'm going to hit import. So everything looks normal. Everything looks normal. There we go. So you'll get kind of this weird kind of, I don't know, portal kind of thing where it's just like you see a solid, but now I'm looking at it, I don't see it because the normals are all, there's a normal that's missing. And so you're actually looking at the inside of the box. And if something is basically seeing the back of a normal, say the red, there's nothing there. When it creates those faces, when it creates those on a Blender object, the Blender object is going to that's basically where it's showing to the viewer. If you see anything with red, that doesn't exist there, and you're actually looking at the wrong side of the object. So that's one thing. Once you start playing around with the models in Blender, you may encounter and you may see some like issues with. But that's the face orientation. That's kind of like something that's going to be a little more advanced. All you really need to do is just kind of do a cube. Once you get more comfortable and you start basically exploring more shapes, say you want to make a coin, or say you want to make a triangle, say you want to start making stuff, and you can do that. Let's see, is Blender used often in the industry over ZBrush? I've never even heard of ZBrush. I just use Blender because Blender was free. And Blender actually was it was something that I found that I could do stuff with, like 3D printing. Here, I'll transition away from that. some of the stuff that I actually did is I actually made some simple stuff in some 3D modeling programs, and I have a 3D printer, and I kind of made like little 3D kind of dice tower things. I just did that in Blender for sillies, and then 2020 happened, and so yeah, 2020 happened, and then that basically I went back to the drawing board, and we started doing stuff in Blender. And some of the stuff that we I started doing in Blender, um, I started doing more. I started doing more and more stuff for kind of our games in Tabletop Simulator. And it's funny because when you start playing around in Tabletop Simulator, you kind of want to make your game a little more flashy in some cases. People, you always want to do, people do that with their prototypes. You're always looking for shinier pieces, fun stuff. But it's interesting because in Tabletop Simulator, like I can I can make like a scene, I can make a scenario, I can add, all sorts of fun stuff to it. I can actually, if I wanted to decorate the table with things, I could do that. I could like make an ambiance essentially of stuff. Um, but like it's it's interesting because um once I started doing stuff like that, I was like, well, maybe I might want to change it up, and I might want to do, say, like a dice tower that's like this. This is kind of one of the current prototypes that we have to use as a kind of a dice agitator. Here, I might actually need to, yeah, this is, it's a little, here, I'm going to have to turn off that face orientation thing. But this is kind of a current model that we're using as kind of the agitator for cubes for our game. So then the cubes drop out of this, these six little, ports down at the bottom. Just, silly stuff. And I mean, like, this has just been, months and months of playing around inside of Blender. Once you start to get the hang of, Blender, and you start to like manipulate stuff, you start to just kind of build and start to add and toss those things into Tabletop Simulator, and you start, kind of like expanding and building stuff. And I mean, like, it starts, uh, you start just expanding and kind of playing around and being in a new realm of like, say, I could print out a bunch of cards, but I can't. Printing on a tower like this would take me a while. I have a 3D printer, but I mean, like, I don't probably have like the 19 hours that it would take to print out this huge tower. So with Tabletop Simulator, I can kind of play around with that concept a little faster and a little easier. Um, but there's other things when you're doing Tabletop Simulator. Say if you want to make it a little more, if you want to spruce up some of your pieces, you want to add some kind of components, you want to say uh, add logos to items. So when you are playtesting with people that say are like, well, I can't tell what that is, I'm colorblind. You're like, yeah, crap. So what I'll have to do is I'll just go in and I'll open up. I'll just have to take that file, and then I'll just have to, here, I'll show you what the scrolls thing looks like in just a short second. Um, did I go to art school? I did not go to art school. I do IT stuff during the day, so that's kind of my main, that's my day job. So I'm always in front of a computer. Um, so, but the thing is that if you've got enough time, I mean, like, if you've got enough time and you have the resources for it, I mean, like, it's, you can sit down and just do it. Knitting, learning another language. I mean, like, granted, well, knitting, you got to go get yarn, and you got to go get little hooks. There's like knitting needles. There's like crocheting like hooks. I don't know. I'm not good with that. I tried to do that. I couldn't do it. But in the case for like, um, there we go. So that's it. That was the scroll. So I just basically took scroll, 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 and put it on each of the layers, and there it is. Um, art school necessary to become a 3D modeler. Uh, I don't know. I mean, like, that's the interesting thing with a lot of these art tools. I mean, like, you don't need to go to art school to do that sort of stuff. If you've got, there's tons of free art programs. Like um, Blender's, you know, free and it's crazy powerful. I mean, and it doesn't have to be for 3D modeling. There's animation and all sorts of stuff. People, I think, use it for 2D animation, but you can also use it for 3D animation, like sculpting. Like if I wanted to, say, sculpt this thing, I could try and sculpt it. I don't know. I don't know if it's going to actually work. Oh yeah, it's kind of working. Here. Yeah, look. Look, I'm sculpting. I think I'm sculpting. I don't know. I'm not good with clay. um, yeah, so this is funny because this is for like board game, like board game design and board game, like, that sort of thing. But it's interesting because, like, I will say I watched a lot of videos and it's a lot there. I mean, like, the thing about about a lot of this, whether it be mm, my headset turned off again. I knew it. I'm so glad that I had this thing in front of me. Um, so, like, here, there's one thing that I have that I I definitely just I love it. Is if you go into, I think it was, yeah, a lot of applications in here. I'll transition back so you can see it. Um, so this is actually Blender's manual. A lot of places will have their manuals online, and you get and if you have any questions, these manuals are like just prime for doing whatever you need. Um, the Blender manual is extremely helpful. Um, I don't, in the case for like art stuff, like if you're doing stuff with like drawing and that sort of thing, I mean, like you could look at like Bob Ross. You could basically take, there's like lots of like TV shows and lots of art shows that basically go over like art and go over kind of like art styles and art, to learn with on that. But like Blender is super, like, this is probably one of the more handier things that I've had. There's another there's other stuff, and it's all just like playing around with it. That's the other thing about it, is just like play around with the items that you kind of like. Some of these, if Doug is still present, Doug's gonna go crazy when he sees this. Um, this is this is Saturn. So Doug, the person that was earlier on the chat, he talked about his kind of his game. Yeah, you're gonna look how crazy this is. So this is Saturn, and Saturn has rings. And here, what I'll do is I'll go into the layout, and here I'll do it proper. So I'm actually going to zoom in on some of this, but like, yeah, I was able to kind of just play around with it and just do like rings. That was a tutorial on YouTube that basically shows you how to use rings by kind of taking some of the objects um, and taking them through. I think it was, no, not texture paint. It is, I think it was shading. Yeah. So shading is interesting. Like, this is this is super high level stuff, but you can link up like themes and all sorts of like layers, and you can kind of make pretty crazy stuff out of it. This is not like super high level, but I mean it's like watch enough YouTube videos and you get to this level. Um, I'll turn off Saturn, but here let's go back to let's show off like Neptune is in here. Yeah, there's Neptune. Here let's bring out all the planets. You know, let's get Earth. Let's you know what Saturn deserves to be out here. Let's have them all just kind of hang out and party. So these are the planets that basically did yeah yeah. But these are just like kind of the simple planets that just kind of once you play around with stuff and you watch, you know, kind of like you kind of play around and you kind of want to experiment into something. You see something, you're like, oh, that'd be kind of interesting to get into. Yeah, I mean, like, these were just, I think, I'm gonna go into, nope, shading? Yeah. Let's go into, yep, Pluto. And Pluto, all Pluto is just kind of a couple of little things. Like I took some gradients, some colors, I added some noise to it. Where's Pluto? Pluto's around here somewhere. Pluto's the little guy. There he is. There it is. She, I don't know, planets. So we got Pluto right here. Pluto's a very simplistic kind of color palette, you know. And then I got Earth. Earth, I kind of played around with some of the kind of colors to kind of give it a little more of a beach vibe. I wanted to kind of have some fun beach style, like you know, like it's a good, it's a lot of beach, a lot of beachfront property on that Earth. It's some prime real estate. And then you've got, you know, we got Mars, I think right here. No, that's Venus. So Venus was super warm, but I did want to have some clouds in there. Kind of Mars has that coppery feel to it. But yeah, and what is that one? That was Mercury. Yeah, Mercury is. I think I just cheated and I was like, you know what? Like the metal, right? Yeah, that works. You got Saturn with its kind of swirliness. You got fun little stuff. But yeah, just I mean like it was a goof. It was a goof, and I was like, can I do this and can I do that? Just you know, you kind of put yourself into a challenge. You're like, can I pop you know pop that into Tabletop Simulator? And it's funny because like it's just you know you kind of come up with like little missions for yourself to do stuff, and you'll be like, yeah. No, their size is not accurate at all. Um, and I should just start and see if I like it. And that's the thing is that it's like you don't have to spend a whole lot of time in doing it. I mean, there's nothing that's basically holding you to doing this. I mean, like this is just kind of like it's you know, it's interesting. What am I going to do with this? Nothing. I can take a look at it and I mean, it's just something crazy that I'm just making. Like, you know, people make vases and stuff. They go to like pottery class, you know, like, and then they're gonna use it to just put like car keys in or something. But uh, like you just start off with ideas. This one actually, it was interesting because Doug, these are all Doug's planets that we printed out. He gave me the files uh, to basically print out my 3D printer, so I did, and then like now we you know I had those files left over and I was like, hey man, I bet I could like do some fun stuff to them and then maybe export them. And then now like for example I could use this Saturn and rings UV image that is on the left hand of the side of the screen. I can import that and I should be able to pop that into Tabletop Simulator in theory. I haven't tested it out yet, but this was just kind of a goof. Yeah, Julia made the files. Yes, sorry. Doug did not make the files. Stolen valor. Julia made the files. But yes, um, now like, and that's kind of the thing is it was just an idea. Like, there's tons of fun stuff that you can find on the internet to just goof around with. I mean, like, and that's the other thing about this is just goofing around and playing around. Um, I'm not so I'll answer that in a little bit. Um, but like, I have Twin Peaks. This is a rendering. This is a 3D rendering of the mountain range in North Bend, Washington, near where I grew up. And yeah, sure enough, this is a. I gotta get rid of that plane. That plane is just ugly. Hey, look. All right, perfect. We got like a nice little sun. The lights coming off the mountains. That's kind of cool, right? But this is just me goofing around. I was like, I want to make like get some trees. Want to have some fun with it. It's just playing around with it. Blender is super intense when you get started with it, but once you start playing around with it, it's fun. That's super funny. Yeah, this is Mount Si. This is actual here. Let me take a step back. Yeah, this is actual United States Geological Survey data you can download, and then there's a way that you can take that data and you actually can manipulate a kind of platform or not platform a oh gosh, what is it? The object is called a uh, it's kind of like a plain grid or a grid mesh, sorry. And so I just blew it up really big, and then there's a couple of steps you can do, and it applies that height map to that. So it's pretty fun. Yeah, I know. Topography, I'm like way off from board games. I'm super far away from board games right now. Um, but that's just like that's that's just basically kind of an idea, just playing around with it, just having fun with it. Um, and this is stuff is that if you're looking at stuff, you can just be like, oh, I kind of wish that I could turn this object into um, make it transparent or I think it was no, I think let me do a quick glance. But yeah, it's just kind of playing around with this stuff. That's the main takeaway. I can't find it. I'm never gonna find it. Wait, I think I found it. Yeah, there we go. BSDF. And so like I can go in. Nope, that's not what I wanted. So I'll go into like BSDF, and so I can kind of go into say I wanted to do glass. So it can actually go into what some of these things do, and it can give some super nice examples of what it would look like uh, in Blender of what that would do. Um, but yeah, just make it fun. Don't like you're not. I mean, like you're not. I'm not doing this to for other anything other than literally board game prototype design. That's literally how this got started. But it also is like me just goofing around with it. It's like it now has kind of like made me kind of think more in like three dimension with board gaming and that sort of stuff. And like um, it's crazy. Like the realm that you have in your fingertips for like Blender, for Paint, for Tabletop Simulator. It's just a lot of stuff you can do. It's just super like rough at the beginning. Like you're gonna try and figure out. You're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have done that. But once you start going through version after version after version, like of stuff, I mean, like my first dice tower, like this one was my first dice tower. If I was to print this thing out now, like it would it would look light years better than this thing. I mean, this thing's still pretty impressive for what it is, but man, like I'd printing that out, like that'd be a real eye catcher. People would be like, "Oh, is that from the manufacturer, from the factory? Is that a prototype?" And be like, "Sure." um, I am not developing Tabletop Simulator, but I am designing board games and prototypes in Tabletop Simulator. And that is that's this kind of application that's right here. Um, and that's where kind of these, these objects we're just kind of playing around with. And the dice that we just made earlier with the transparency, God, I love that. I can't I can't get over that. That is so fun. I'm such a fan of that. It's so 80s. So 80s and just wild. 90s. That's very 90s. 90s, 80s. I don't know. Getting some vibes. Um, so making a game about placing trees in a forest and this map as a possible board is blowing my mind right now. Yeah, no, I mean like I mean it's crazy like the stuff that you can find and it's free. I didn't pay for the geological survey. Oh, that'd be ridiculous to be paying for height map data. No. there's a website there's a website called terrain.party where you can make height maps. You can download height maps and you can put them into like city skylines. It's like a Sim City style game. So you can make maps of wherever you want. You want like mountainy, hilly areas. Go get in Terrain Party. You want like flat Kansas. you, you can export the height map for Kansas or Ohio. Ohio is a lovely place. It is also flat, but yeah. Um, but yeah, it's just kind of the simple like once you're playing around with the tools, you'll start to get more into it. And that's just the main thing. This cube here is for a reason. This cube is here to just destroy it essentially. This thing is to basically, you know, make weird well, that wasn't a good. That was actually really bad. This thing is just to experiment and destroy and like kind of manipulate and shapeshift and do all sorts of stuff. Like it's it's crazy the amount of stuff that you can kind of like do once you start playing around with it. Like just silly. And that's the big thing is just I started off with it being simple. Just take the cube, make the UV, goof around with it in MS Paint, and there you go. Now you've got like literally like an object that you kind of can. You've got dice, you've got cubes. Um, I can make this thing as monstrous as I want. This thing could be scale. Man, let's just go like 7. That's like 71. That's far too large. Yeah, here we go. Look at that. You get to see like, whoa boy. Uh-oh. It's too big. It's it's ruining everything on the table. But yeah, I mean like you can do something as crazy as that, and now that's your like die. So, yeah, designing your cards and tiles in Canva. I've never heard of Canva. It's interesting like how many tools there are to base like proxy software and all sorts of stuff. Like people that made like Magic the Gathering cards in now like design tabletop prototypers and stuff like that are finding these like applications. Like I use a program called Card Creator that I found on Steam. And that was like a weirdly it was it was like you can make your own cards and like the examples you can make magic cards. It's like out of the gate it gives you the template and you're like magic cards and you're like okay, I see what this is used for. But you can also design the cards on how you want them to look and all sorts of stuff, and so take it from there. Design your cards through Card Creator. um, I used Publisher. Publisher is an awful piece of software for designing card games and that sort of thing. And that is so much work, and you had to export the image, you had to print out the stuff, you had to cut it. Oh, there's no thank you. Um, but yeah, it's just interesting now because um, what say that there's like in 20 near 2021 2022 or something like that. I'm going to take this game on the road. I'm actually going to go to a convention with it. So now it's like you it, this is, I feel, kind of an interesting realm for people to kind of design and kind of do that sort of stuff. And then you have, and now you have kind of the chops that you can get this and you can make this happen like super fast and super easy. And like now essentially it's like I can throw it all together and there it is. Um like the first like 20-25 minutes, that was very simple. The rest of it is just, yeah, just explore and have fun with it. And it's like it's crazy because that's the other thing is like when you're especially working in Blender, like, and you're especially working a lot of these tools, I don't I'm not like an artist. I'm not a professional 3D modeler. Like I you watch YouTube videos, you go on and read the Blender manuals. Treat it like a dictionary. Like you see a word or something, type it in there, read about it. You see a word you don't recognize, type that word in there, learn more about it. Basically, kind of tailor your focus as you're kind of like you're ripping through kind of these you know things as you if you're looking to learn and play around in it. And that's the big thing. Like I made cassette tapes for a game in Tabletop Simulator. Like I made like it's once you start kind of getting into it, you're like, oh man, I could make my own meeples, and I could make my own little like houses, and I could make my own objects, and I can make my own dice tower. Like it basically starts to just open up this crazy realm of like it's not you're not just kind of making cutting out pieces of paper and then you sleeve them. Now we're going to play a thing. Maybe like you'll have like a little figurine. Maybe you make like some ambiance, have some fun with it. And that's like, I think that's kind of the one thing about that is just like, when you're at a convention or something like that, a lot of people, you'll see a lot of these prototypes that are put out on the tables, but now you can like literally dump your imagination like into a table and like that's like it's wild. So and my camera's out of focus. Yeah. If you have any questions or anything like that, like we do have the playtest Northwest Discord. um yeah, so never played Tabletop Simulator. I am guessing it is awesome, and you get to import things for your own use. Yeah, I mean, like are here. I gotta just like minimizing. Nope, that was Blender again. Nope, I closed Tabletop Simulator. Tabletop Simulator is great because you can import, um, you can play simple board games, but you can also kind of use it and um, make your own board games. And that's what a lot of designers right now it's just kind of leaning towards is it's like um, how do I basically kind of design and prototype right now and in you know this this time, like it's such a wild thing. And so now I've got like one of our games, Gem Cataclysm, the game that my wife and I have um, been working on, and we took to conventions in 2018 and 2019. This whole game is inside Tabletop Simulator. Um, there's all the gems that I actually was going to 3D print and have included in the game. Um, and my wife also drew those out. My wife does watercolors and a bunch of other stuff. Here's some fancy cubes that I did in Blender. All I did was just literally export the cubes in Blender, and that's it. Yeah, and what is being said by an encore, it's nice because you don't have to reprint for every iteration, is absolutely true. You have a misspelling and you notice it, you literally can go back, update it in the file, export it, and then like that's it. You've like 4 steps. If you were to do something like that for your physical game, you'd have to like find the one sheet to print out, cut the one card out. It'd just be a waste of paper, a waste of ink. You'd just be like, whatever, just write on the card, cross it out, spell it right on the card. Um, this was the game that we worked on in 2018 and 2019. There's no fancy objects in this game. There's no craziness. I mean, we added meeples, and I later on added gems after I started getting like, a little more, uh, started getting better in, um, Blender. Um, but now, like, we have the dungeon prototype. Dungeon prototype is one of the games that I started working on. And this is just craziness. This is like absolute nuttiness. There's a thing that you can drop cubes inside of, and like it's just is wild stuff that you can do. Uh, you play around with it. You can have fun. Um, and it's just an interesting application. Um, I have put a lot of time into Tabletop Simulator, but I also like, I know code scripting. Like I can do Lua. Like I learned Lua as well, just to make simple scripts, so I can teleport cubes from a bag to the top of the tower, and then it'll drop through the tower and just showers the whole board in copper. Like crazy stuff like that. Um, and, and I mean, that's Blender and Tabletop Simulator, and I mean, like, it's just wild. What is that? What is that? I don't even know what that is. And that's super funny. Oh, well. Oh, I see what I did. Okay, that makes sense. Sorry. I noticed something that I did on the table and it looked weird, and I was like, that makes no sense. Um, but yeah, um, this thing, I mean, like a lot of the stuff that we do, like when I'm doing these kind of like solo things, is basically like educational or like how to's. Because that's the thing when you're doing something like this. When you're doing something like this, is that it's just like, it's really like, it can be really tough. It can be super daunting, like start out, in Blender, and you'll export it and it'll look weird. But I mean, like, that's the same way that, like, if you do, like, I don't know, man, you do, like, bring up pottery again. You make a coffee mug in pottery. Yeah, like, it's gonna spill coffee everywhere if you like tilt it a certain way, but I mean, it's still gonna be a mug that you can drink coffee out of. And if you go back into the thing, you make a newer coffee mug, and you're like, okay, well, I'll do it with this. And you'd be like, oh, but maybe I'll have, like, I don't know, a little hook that I can like mold on the coffee that'll hook like a donut onto the side of it, and I can have a donut and I've got my coffee. Silly stuff. You know, like, it's crazy. Once you start getting into the tool, once you start kind of playing around with it and having fun with it for yourself, and not necessarily having like deadlines or craziness, but you're just more treated as goals or kind of funsies, like, you start making a lot of stuff that can start becoming super wild. And these things that we're going through right now is just like super fast ways to get into and kind of design these prototypes, and get things in your mind onto the table much faster. um, and that's actually something wild, because something like this, you wouldn't it's not as easy in a physical realm. So now it's just like you have like a complete stream of like your imagination dumped into like your components, and you can make anything you want. And I mean, like, it's absurdly wild, like that kind of power, um, when you're designing something. The biggest learning curve in Blender, and how long have I been using it? I would probably say that I've been using it like off and on over like, I want to say that I've been using it off and on ever since, well, I want to say I in actual Blender, I didn't start working on that last prototype that I showed until October. So in October, I had printed this thing out, but I didn't use Blender to make this thing. I actually have a VR headset, and there was a program that you could model something in 3D. That took me a long time to make this in 3D. It was an absurd amount of time that I don't feel comfortable saying on air. But like I made it, it's cool, and then I printed it out, and that's cool. In October, I took this and I started making a game out of it. I was like, I'm going to make a game that involves you. So that was my goal. Like I was like, I want this to be a thing. And it's a thing. And so October is when I was like, okay, how am I going to put this physical thing that I probably do not have the original files for, nor do I feel that I would be able to easily put them in Tabletop Simulator. How do I put them in Tabletop Simulator? I had to literally redo it from scratch in October of 2020. From October 2020 to now is pretty much it. That's the extent I've been actively, heavily using Blender, and exclusively using Blender. As time has gone on, it's just a lot of videos, a lot of educational things. It's just been super handy, and there's just lots of resources online. And you'd be surprised. You think of something silly or something like, I would like to do X with this object. Like there is going to be a tutorial that'll say like, oh, why is this transparent? And then it'll basically teach you like a video that'll be like face orientation, because you don't have the all the faces oriented properly, that are basically on the outside of the object. Then some parts of it are going to be transparent and they're going to be invisible and you're not going to be able to see them properly. Um, but yeah, like I have not been using it that long. It's been pretty crazy. Um, mm, I caught it. I saw it happen again. It's because there's no audio playing in my headphones, and so my headphones are just like you're not using them, so it just shuts off. But yeah, that's it. I mean, like the biggest learning curve in Blender is I don't, it's weird because the way that I've used Blender, I've tackled things bit by bit. Once you start once you start actively once you start actively using Blender to do stuff in Blender, it gets a little more difficult. The modeling and shaping of stuff is probably the hardest part, because that's when you're kind of dealing with stuff in a 3D space, and it's tough at first. And so there are like it's just how everything is arranged, how everything ties together, and then like making it look neat and having it work. Um, Having it work is the hard part in Tabletop Simulator. Um, there wasn't something I realized until like later, is that I didn't triangulate the faces. Now, if you look at that cube, the faces were squares. They were 6 squares. You saw the UV thing. It was just an unwrapped. It's kind of like it's a wrapped up cross essentially. That's what a D6 is. But it's like because of like because some faces, if they're not perfectly square or they're not like rectangular, like if they have more than like 4 points, they don't show up in Tabletop Simulator. So you have to like triangulate faces to make sure that like a face part will have only 3 points, so 3 vertices that are in that face. Um, and that was like the hardest thing, is because like you have to work on an object and then you have to like triangulate the face and then export the object, and try not to save that you triangulated the faces because it makes it look like trash. um, but it's just like it's interesting because when you first start working in Blender, it's fine for you to say like, I have no idea what this does and I will probably never know what this does. But the interesting thing is that the more and more that I've done kind of goofs and playing around and fun, I've got to know more about the program and I've started using more and more functions that are like it blows me away. And that also applies to Tabletop Simulator. When you're designing these games, you're going through and you're like making these games, you start to learn more. You have the tools at your disposal to the left. Like you can make dexterity games in Tabletop Simulator. Like a lot of people are just like, I don't know, it's going to be hard, it's going to be weird, it's not going to be as perfect. Sure. But I mean, you can do some things that will actually kind of work in that realm. That game that I have, it uses gravity. It showers the cubes all over the map. So like it does a good job of dropping that down. Yeah, the triangulation stuff, that's whatever. It's I mean like it's Blender. It's just free. It's just goof around, just have fun with it. I mean like it's really interesting how like when you're doing stuff in Blender, it's it's very overwhelming. There's a lot of stuff going on, and once you start learning more stuff, and I mean like watch videos, that's what I did. I watched so many videos, and then like because you'll do something, and then you'll. I think the big part about learning, and when you see like when you're like trying to learn something is when you say like there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way for that. That's like the thing is that you're just like, okay, well, I'm gonna find a better way for it. Um, I can't assume that that is it. And that's like the thing is that you're doing it. So make everything on Blender, but do you sorry, but do you use like a game engine or something to get like gravity and such? Tabletop Simulator actually has gravity. It is built on Unity. It is built on the Unity engine. Um, yeah, because it's not Unreal. It's not the Unreal engine. It's built on Unity. And so it has gravity, it has physics, it has all sorts of stuff. So Tabletop Simulator is able to do a lot of those kind of um, you know, physics and mass and velocity and all that. So yeah, it's interesting because like doing through a lot of the stuff through Blender, it's just like just kind of Blender was to get the square and then get the UV image so you could then take that UV image, draw stuff all over it, make copies of that UV image, and then you could paste up those cube objects. But then you take like the images and you could use multiple images, but the object file is still the same. So it's like, you just need that framework for that file. Um, but it's crazy stuff, and it's just like it's learning. It's always going to be learning. I mean, like there's always going to be something you're going to want to do, and you're going to be like, how do I make clouds? I'm learning. I'm learning how to make clouds. I mean, that was what I was trying to do in the Twin Peaks scene that I had. But yeah, and I think it's crazy because now it's just like it's interesting because now we have you have so many things in your disposal right now to like make a game. So I could if we were to go make a prototype somewhere, I just print out, I could just write on the cards or whatever. There's like such a low bar for you to make like a game prototype. But now it's like interesting because there the bar is weirdly higher because you now have to at least have you have to use an application. It's not as simple as me just writing on a card. You're like, well, I'll just do it through MS Paint. Well, I'm gonna have to do it through MS Paint for like 52 cards, and then I'm gonna have import those cards onto like somewhere. It's just interesting stuff as you basically start to work in Tabletop Simulator, Blender, all these other things. It's just like you basically have to start somewhere, and then it basically will get you through. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of the simple little goof that we were going to go through with Tabletop Simulator. Um, there's a lot of stuff that you can learn through online. Like I said, YouTube, Blender manuals. Tabletop Simulator has a similar manual, so you can basically learn how to do certain things within scripting for Lua. Like there's all sorts of stuff like that. You can learn Lua online. There's so many things. And there's multiple like paint applications. That anime manga paint application, so good. typically I don't do YouTube tutorials. I don't know. Like I feel weird doing YouTube tutorials. I don't know. I feel there's like so many tutorials. It's just like I don't know. But I mean like we do a stream. So Playtest Northwest does a stream every Tuesday night and we basically do board game themed stuff. And then typically if Nicole doesn't show up, it's I'll basically step in and I'll be like, "Oh, I'll do something." And every single time I'm like, "I could do something silly." And I'm like, "Or I could do something in 3D modeling." or like or I can be like, "How you do this in Tabletop Simulator or how you script or code or blah 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 blah." It's weird because like I don't think of myself as like I could be a teacher for it. I guess I'm teaching now. Like, is this how teachers happen? I don't know. I'm not really too sure how that all works, but like, you know, um, but we do try and do like we'll have these talks. It was interesting because I almost changed gears. There was a person that actually responded on meetup.com/playtestnorthwest and they asked 4 questions about feedback they should give as a playtester, how much playtesting is typical. Like they asked a lot of like really good questions, and I was like, these are great questions, and I bet they're way more engaging than me talking about Blender. and but it was only because Nicole was like, I want to talk about that too, and I was like, all right, we'll save it. So now we're saving that for next week. So if you are in the chat and you were the person that asked that question, yeah, it was you. Yeah, all right, yeah. But yeah, those are great questions. Especially copyright, copyright, copyright. It's well, yeah, I told myself I wouldn't go too deep on it, but there's actually like there was a book that came out called uh The White Box, and it was just essentially like it was just from start to finish, thinking, designing, playtesting, pitching, manufacturing, like board game. Yeah, yeah, it's yeah. Um, Next week won't probably be as blenderific as it was today. I probably who knows? I have my own stream. I could probably do it on my own stream. Um, but yeah, it's super wild, super wacky stuff, and it's just play around, just have fun with it. That's the important part. Um, I think watching like 20 plus seasons of Bob Ross has basically been like, no, it's not going to be as good as you think it is on your first try. And boy, oh boy, I made some real ugly shapes. I mean, I have one right now in Blender, but it was super fast. Um, but yeah, if you got, if you have any questions, if you have anything like that, we'd love to hear them. We also do a thing on here. I can actually show. I'll show this. Um, there's stuff available on meetup.com /Test Northwest. We also have the Twitter account. We also have a Facebook account. But the main one was we also have a Discord account. And you can actually get the Discord account if you go into meetup.com and sign up for Sunday playtesting. Um, we're always looking for people to hang out and that sort of stuff. Yeah, and it's almost 8 for me too. I probably should be getting going too. But yeah, if you have any questions about that, let us know. Oh man, I should put a thing that says Discord. I should do that. I should we should have quick little slogans that actually tell information for Discord. That is a good reminder. Thank you for that. But other than that, good night. And we will answer some more questions. Oh yeah, yep. If you haven't gotten Discord, get it. It's basically a lot of our playtesting and stuff through there. But thanks for hanging around. Thanks for watching. And if you have any other questions, let us know. We'd love to hear from you guys. And have a good night.